MMC TV USA. Now on POTV, Channel 100.
Welcome to the Readers Cafe at MMC TV. Today we are with Most Venerable Yogavacara Rahula Bhante. Thank you so much, Venerable, for joining our Readers Cafe. Today we are going to review his book, One Night Shelter. One Night Shelter, written by Venerable Yogavacara Rahula Thero. So he is himself present at our studio. So thank you very much, Venerable, for joining our MMC. So I was wondering, why you named this book One Night Shelter.
Well, One Night Shelter, I had heard that phrase from reading some other books, and it was a phrase where it was a Zen story of a Zen monk. In the tradition back in the old days, monks would go visit temples, and then they would knock on the gate of the temple and want to stay one night, or stay sometime. And then they were told, well, you have to debate with the head monk first. And so they debated with the head monk, but they might have felt a little bit proud. And he said, you can only stay one night.
Oh, that's kind of examination?
Yeah, it was just, I don't know exactly what it was, but I just, and that caught my mind in it. And so for a couple of years I didn't think about it, but then when I started to write this book, after I started writing, somehow that title popped into my mind. And then it kind of stuck there. Now there's another meaning of the One Night Shelter too.
Oh.
And basically it means from the time we are born and our whole life, everything that we do in our life is just a temporary resting point for our mind to get comfortable with. But because of impermanence, everything changes and we have to keep moving on. So life is just a series of phases that the person goes through, from a baby through adolescence, and then they might be a Boy Scout, they might be a soldier, they might be a college student. But everything is just an identification for one night is just a metaphor for impermanence.
Impermanence, just like a temporary
that everything
motto.
changes, yeah. And so the book was to illustrate how everything I experienced in my life from the childhood up to the present was just a string of continually changing identities and desires and milestones, but there's no place for the mind to cling on to because everything changes.
It's changing all the time.
So that's kind of where the title came from.
And also the second title, From Home to Homeless. When I hear the homelessness, it's very same in America, right, Bhante? The people say you are homeless.
Well, from home to homelessness is a metaphor for a person, ordaining as a monk, pabbajja, going forth, right?
Yeah.
So you leave the home life, like say you with your mother, your father, your family, in a kind of a place where you always come back to. So as a monk, you leave that, right?
Yes.
And you go into without having a home, like especially in the time of the Buddha, where monks were always wandering.
From one place to another.
And so they were homeless, so to speak. No place to really hang your head. But that's also a metaphor for the impermanence too, because everything changes. we can't stay in any place. We don't have time enough to form attachments or a home. And so, the monk is homeless. And that's not only physical things, but it's even mental things, so that we don't allow our mind to stick on the past or the future. And it's just you're flowing from moment to moment. And so that's kind of the meaning of the meditation and the practice of mindfulness, just floating with the present moment in life as each thing comes to us without fighting against it, trying to hold on to it or trying to push it away. Things come, they last a few minutes, maybe longer, they change, and you effortlessly just keep going.
Constantly changing all the time.
Through life, yes.
Yeah, right. It's a wonderful autobiography book, Venerable. I went through the book. I feel like this is like a traveling blog book from 70s about, a search for peace and happiness to the southern part of Asia. It's a very inspirational for me. I also love trekking, hiking around the mountains, and the way you share is, it's combined with the Dharma.
Yes.
Than normal traveling blogs. And I see, from your biography that, you name as it's called war baby booms. And,
baby boomers.
Baby booms who are born after 60s, 70s.
I was born in the baby boom generation, and that's a saying, a metaphor for people that were born just after the end of World War II. So it starts from 1946 and goes until about 1964. So the people that were born from 1946 until about 64, they were called baby boomers. And the reason for it, because so many babies were born during that time. World War II, so many thousands, millions of people died. The population had been depleted. And even the babies in America, so many. And people, were deprived of really any, intimate contact. Couldn't get married, or a lot of divorces happened. So afterward, it was a celebration. And men and women got together, and now they could, party, and they could meet each other, and so naturally babies are, a result of that. And of course they need to replenish the population. So that's why it was called the baby boom.
Oh, thank you very much.
And because there were so many millions of babies born during that time.
Mm-hmm. And also, I see from your sharing that a lot of this kind of it's called a hippie culture. Then how the people are addicted to drugs, they're celebrating a search of happiness and peace.
Yes.
Were they like an effect of this war, like a generation trauma?
Well, it was just an era, it was because of impermanence. Everything started to change. So after the war, and the babies that were born, in 1950 onwards, technology was starting to really develop. And everything was new. TVs were invented, and cars, and so many things, and everything was changing so fast. So, and there was pressure from our parents to want to conform. And to take over the family business for perhaps, or to fit these preconceived ideas of what a gentleman should be like, or what life should be. We were told, the purpose of life is to get an education, to get married, to get a good job, to have a family, have a nicer house and a white picket fence. This was the so-called American dream, of the 60s that everybody was striving to get a hold of. And so the drive for education, the parents wanted the kids to go to the universities and get a degree and then get a job and earn lots of money. So this idea of the American dream, but the hippies at that time, maybe it coincided, it was the same time that, Zen monks and Indian yogis and Buddhist monks started because of the airplane and easy to travel. They started coming to the West at the same time. So there was this kind of conjunction, you see. And they were preaching about, freedom of mind and not being, put into a box and attaining, meditation. They talk about meditation, experiencing, expanded states of consciousness and awareness. And this was kind of diametrically opposed to the sort of the American dream kind of thing, not getting stuck and put in a mold, but freedom to travel and freedom to do what one wanted. And if you didn't feel like taking over the family business, you shouldn't feel pressure to have to do it. And wanted the freedom to travel. And so now because of the airplanes and other things, the desire to travel was very strong. And then also the use of drugs. So because of, the Indian yogis, came to America, and of course ganja and so on have been smoked in India for thousands of years.
Yes, as a spiritual, psychedelic.
Yeah. And even ganja was smoked in America, but it was like the beatniks and so on. It wasn't very popular, but for some reason, the younger people started getting a hold of that and getting high. So this idea of getting high. At the same time, rock and roll music started playing, all the groups from England. And so it was a whole kind of cultural shift started to happen. And the baby boomers were right at that time. I was like 16 years old when all of that was coming out. And that's the time our hormones are growing. And so, we got caught up in that. And so it was just a seismic shift from the old to another generation. And actually, I didn't go to India seeking a guru. Like, the Beatles went to India, and they sought their guru, and it became a thing for people going to India to find a guru. Because in those days, there was hardly any Buddhism or yoga even in America. Before 1970, the early 70s, there was hardly any, there was no Dharma. You couldn't find any anywhere really. There was no temples. And so a lot of people, were going to India. And when I was in the army in Europe, I met Americans and Europeans who had been coming back from India. And they told me of all the adventures of going to India and so on. And I developed a strong desire to do that once I got out of the army. And so initially I didn't go to India seeking a guru or even in a religion. I basically went to have fun and games and to stay stoned and just to enjoy traveling, because I always enjoyed traveling. So that's how that came about. And when I got out of the army in 1971, I started planning a trip to India. And I told a few of my friends in Riverside that I grew up with, I'm going to India. Well, why don't you come along? And so 3 or 4 of them actually came along with me for some of that journey. And some of that is, so that's all mentioned in the book. That whole kind of process.
Yeah, as I learned from this book, the way you made the tour to India via Europe, and once you entered to the Asian territory through Afghanistan, how was your feeling toward this Asian culture?
Well, the goal of my trip was to get to India, and so I had an idea that I wanted to travel through those countries, but because we decided with the friends, we decided to start in Stockholm, and it was cheap. It was easy to get a flight directly from like New York to Stockholm, and I hadn't been there before, so I like to travel too. So we decided to start there, and then slowly work our way down through Europe to all the places where the hippies hung out, like Copenhagen, Amsterdam. These were the centers for the hippies back in the 70s. because I had been there when I was in the army to visit it. So like that, we traveled down through Europe into the Canary Islands, and then went across North Africa to Greece, and then to Turkey, and then through Turkey to Iran, and then finally coming to Afghanistan. And that was characterized by staying stoned almost all the time, with smoking, hashish, and even taking LSD and things like that, because that's what the hippies were doing. And so, but coming to Asia was a really cultural shift. But in that times, most countries were friendly to Americans then, and to Europeans, and it was fairly easy to get visas and travel through there. But I did get into some, trouble, and I wound up getting put in jail in Afghanistan with my friend for trying to sneak some hashish over the border into Pakistan to take to India. And so we got caught. We had an Islamic trial, and we had to stay in the jail for 1 month. And they took our passports, and then we had to pay a $500 fine to get out of the prison, and that was all the money that I had at the time. And so I had to go back to Greece to get more money sent from my mother to continue my journey to India. But my other friends, the other friend that I had, he had enough. He went back home. So then I was on my own, going from Afghanistan to Pakistan and to India.
There is a saying of Oscar Wilde, is every saint has a past and every sinner has a future. So it's remind
you
your
might
story.
say that, yes. But when I got to India, that was like, because coming through the Muslim countries, it was all a new experience. But when I got to India and I crossed that border, the Wagah border between Pakistan and India, and I saw the people over in India, very laid back, and the coolies that came in to carry your bags. And when I crossed the border, it was like, I've come home. And it was kind of a deja vu experience. Like, it was, I'm home finally, Maybe it was because I had been thinking about coming to India for a long time, but I don't know, there was just a real tangible shift, And then that first night we went to the Golden Temple in Amritsar, and then traveling India was, much more pleasant than going through some of the other countries. Also, it was very, very cheap to travel in India in those days, And then I went up to Manali, and then eventually, came across to, and I heard about trekking in Nepal. That was all new to me. I didn't know about, you could actually trek in Nepal and go up to the foot of Mount Everest. That was like, wow, you really do that? And so that's what, and also I wanted to visit Lumbini, the birthplace of the Buddha. And so that journey to Nepal, and I passed through Sarnath, and I stayed there, and I was trying to remember what the Buddha, because I took a course in world religions
in the campus
before I left the USA, and I chose Buddhism as my favorite subject to write a paper about.
It's like a coincidence or karma.
Yeah, so I wrote this paper about Buddhism, but then, when the class was over, I kind of forgot about it. And but then now that I had, gotten into some serious trouble and was put in jail in Afghanistan, was lucky to get out with my life, I was thinking, I have to get off drugs, I got to change my mind. But I didn't know how. And so, as on the way to Nepal, and we stopped through, Sarnath, and I was sitting outside the Mulaganda Kuti Vihara, trying to remember, what did the Buddha teach about meditation? I was thinking, that's really what I got to do. Maybe that's the way I can change my mind to get meditation. But I didn't know exactly where to go to do that. And so once I got into Nepal, I took a trek up in Nepal toward Muktinath. And along the way, I was sitting by a river one day, and a guy just came out of nowhere, sort of like a deva appearing, and sat down and started talking about meditation.
I think he did it in a gym, right?
I think his name was Jim. And, I think I had been high at the time, but he started talking about meditation. I became very interested in what he was saying, and he was explaining about this Goenka system of meditation and scanning the body and feeling all the atomic molecules and so on. And so I was really fascinated by that. And by the time he finished, he said, and there's going to be a meditation course
in Kathmandu. And you turned right?
In about 2 weeks.
Instead of going Muktinath.
Yes. I didn't even finish my trek to Muktinath. I wanted to get back before the retreat had become full, because they have a quota of certain amount of people. And so I hurried back within 2 or 3 days to go back to Kathmandu and sign up for this course.
Instead of physical Muktinath, you try to get your psychological Muktinath, liberation.
Yes, at that time I didn't know exactly what it was. And it was Mahayana Buddhism, and even I didn't even know that.
You didn't know the difference of these
Yes,
schools.
he didn't say it was a course in Mahayana Buddhism, but I went there, then I found out, and I said, so what? I just wanted to meditate. I didn't know the difference then between Theravada and Mahayana really much. Then I took that course, and it's fun, it's a 1 month course, right?
Wow.
A 1 month course. Here, if people find, you advertise a meditation course of 1 weekend, people say, 1 weekend, a whole weekend without speaking and that's like, a big thing, 1 weekend, but 1 month, I didn't even think about it. I just said, yeah, let's go.
That's the U-turn that you
Yeah,
made.
it was a very big U-turn. And so during the course of that meditation retreat, we were, it was Tibetan Buddhism, but we were learning the Lam Rim and the basic principles of the Buddha, the Four Noble Truths, Eightfold Path, greed, hatred, and delusion, meditation, plus the Mahayana's ideas.
So all these visualization techniques.
Yeah, we were using some of that, yeah. But I really got into it, and halfway through that course, it was actually on Thanksgiving Day in 1973 that I had a profound experience one night that basically changed my life. And in fact, it was such a powerful experience. I had a little notebook, and I wrote down in my notebook, today is Thanksgiving Day, 1973. Today is the first day of the rest of my life. Today I'm reborn.
Wow.
I mean, that's what I wrote in the book. It was such a powerful experience. And I knew probably basically then that I probably would become a monk, because I lost all desire to go back and search the American dream and all that. And so that took me down back to Sarnath, where I would talk to some Sri Lankan monks and talking with others, and I wanted to learn Vipassana meditation, so they said, yes, there's a place in Sri Lanka, Kandu Bodha Vipassana Center. You can learn meditation there. The people are very friendly. You can become a monk there also. You can get visa to stay a long time. So this was kind of, my mind was really kind of getting a focus.
All kind of information are flowing towards you.
Yeah, and the direction of where to go, because before I hadn't thought about going to Sri Lanka. But because of this interest to pursue meditation, and also my mind started shifting toward Theravada, because I got some books from Buddha Gaya, and about Vipassana meditation. So my path took me down through India to arrive in Sri Lanka. But along the way, I also started to learn yoga. Because during the first few days of that course, I'm not used to sitting cross-legged or meditating, so I was getting pain. But during the breaks, some of the breaks we had, there was a few people, Westerners, doing some yoga exercises outside behind the meditation tent.
You mean at the Goenka Center?
No, at the Tibetan meditation
the
course.
meditation, oh.
Yeah, and so I went out there and I was asking, what are you doing? And they said, we're doing yoga exercise. And they said, yeah, it helps us to meditate. I said, really? Oh, yeah. So, I thought, I'm going to try that. And so I watched them. I did a few stretches and then started doing that. And I saw that very quickly my ability to sit through pain and to sit more comfortably was starting to change. And so, I continued that. And then when the course was finished and I went down to India, I got a book on yoga. And then on the way to Sri Lanka, I stopped in Goa and I did a yogic, I did a self-retreat to practicing yoga and meditation there on the beach in Goa. And that really, helped me a lot. And so I learned yoga and Buddhist meditation about the same time.
Wow.
And so to me, I didn't really see them as two different things. It was just a kind of a natural combination, for me, that the yoga helped to make the meditation more enjoyable and to get better levels of concentration. I saw that connection
between them. Yeah, thank you so much, Venerable, for sharing your traveling journey and your experience of this spirituality in India and Nepal. So we would like to talk about this book more in our next episode, Venerable. So thank you very much. So we would like to invite our audience to read this wonderful traveling blog book written by Venerable Yogavacara Rahula on how to be inspired through the living example of our most venerable Yogavacara Rahula. So tune with us at MMC TV at Reader's Cafe.
Catch the full program and more. Subscribe to MMC TV USA on YouTube. Follow us on Facebook, Instagram and TikTok